The meeting will come to order. We have a quorum with Mr. Torres being absent. Tonight, we are here to discuss the December 17th regular board meeting agenda items. Dr. Randall.
Madam Chairman, the first item on the agenda is consider approval of out-of-state student trip requests, and we're asking that the Board of Trustees approve out-of-state travel for George Ranch High School students and staff to travel to Foshan, China from January 2nd through 16th, 2016.
Just a quick question. How did these students qualify for this trip over other students? How were they selected?
Leslie.
Leslie?
Did I catch you off guard? I'm sorry.
She told me. She told
I'm just curious how these students were selected.
For
Yes, they're
Foshan?
qualified, yes.
What we did is we, in May, created a pre-registration link for it was actually twofold. Families interested in hosting the Foshan students that are coming over at the same time that we're going over, and the students interested in traveling. We ran that information throughout the summer and newsletters home and to families. And so they kind of pre-registered all summer. So when we came back together in August, we had a firm list of interested students that wanted to travel and interested host families. And we had a parent information night in August. And we had probably in attendance 60 to 70 people show up, kids and parents. And then from there, we gave them the information on both, and then the campus worked together with them. And generally when it got down to it, 15 are actually going. Anybody that was interested was eligible to go. And then right now they sent out just this week, they have finalized the host family assignments for the 2 staff members and the students that are coming over.
Okay, sounds like a great program. Well
It is. It's awesome. Yeah.
Well done.
Ms. Hack, I have one question. Are these juniors and seniors or freshmen, sophomores?
It's generally, last year when we went, we took 10th and 11th graders. 9th graders, our first time to go over, we just wanted to see how it was. And it was 10th and 11th graders, and the 3 seniors that we took were the year before, they were host families. So they were going back over to see their host student again and meet their families. So those seniors went. This year they did open it up. We have a few 9th graders going as well. And what that does is creates a pool of host families for the following year, because they tend to want to host the kids coming over after their children travel over there. So it's really formed some strong relationships.
Bonding.
Mm-hmm.
Very
It
good.
really is. It's really cool. So
Thank you.
I have a question. So
Uh-huh.
how many years has this program been in place?
we will be in 2016 entering our 3rd year. In March of 2013, we hosted the Foshan delegates. It was their education people from China, several superintendents and principals, the equivalent of. They toured George Ranch and Clements High School. We signed the MOU. And then in January of 2014, we hosted Foshan. They came for 2 weeks. And then in January of 2015, we traveled to Foshan, George Ranch did, to high school number 3 over there. And then because we both hosted and traveled, we felt like we had enough, we were strong enough on both ends to exchange at the same time annually. And so we have that in place.
So are there any plans to expand or offer this program to the students at the other high schools?
Yes, it's actually been discussed, and Dr. Randall discussed that as we expand this program, that we start opening up additional seats, possibly at the other schools if they are interested. We're not there yet. We're still establishing it.
We're actually working on an MOU with Taiwan.
Yes.
And Foster High School has agreed to participate in that program. So it will model after the Foshan, but it'll be in Taiwan.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is consider approval of budget amendment requests. We're asking that the board approve the amendment requests that have been listed, and we'll answer any questions that you may have. The next item on the agenda is consider ratification of financial and investment reports. This is a monthly report that the board receives. The next item on the agenda is consider approval of renewal of delinquent tax attorneys contract. We're asking that the Board of Trustees approve the renewal of the contract with the law firm of Linebarger, Goggin, Blair, and Sampson for delinquent tax attorney services for a 3-year period beginning January 1, 2016, and ending December 31, 2018, with automatic 1-year renewals unless terminated by the district or the firm. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of an order authorizing the issuance of Lamar Consolidated Independent School District Unlimited Tax Refunding Bonds. We're asking that the board approve the order authorizing the issuance of LCISD Unlimited Tax Refunding Bond Series 2016. And we'll answer any questions regarding that. Mr. Palmer is here.
Quick question about that. I believe I understand what this is, but in going through the document, I saw nothing that links this back to the actual bond elections. There's nothing say we were authorized to, those are where we're actually authorized to act on behalf of the school district. And you look at the schedule in here, and it gives all kinds of dates, and I understand that's the issuance of bond under each one of those. But to me, it was a little bit confusing not to know this is actually authorized under the 2014 bond issue, a actual series in.
I might need to get Terrell to go in more detail, but I think probably the Series 2007 and 2008 bond covenants probably are where that authorization exists to refund bonds.
Okay, but what I'm saying is the board before us authorized this bond sale or the bond election for 2014.
This doesn't have anything to do with the 14.
It had. All right, then I'm really confused.
This is strictly a refinancing transaction.
Oh, refunding. Okay.
It's a refunding of 2007 and 2008 series.
All right, I'm with you now. I was reading it improperly. I apologize.
To create.
You learned.
You want to
I
add
learned
something,
something.
Terrell?
Again, still, I understand now.
Jill, just briefly, could you explain what that is?
We issue bonds that basically replace the old bonds, and they're at a lower interest rate, which creates savings.
Using the
And-
same money?
It's using new money to pay off the old bonds. It's like refinancing a mortgage, sort of.
Yeah.
So is the
At a
new
lower
money
rate.
is the new money coming from the 2016 bond? Is anything in this related to the 2016 bond?
Let me help you.
No.
Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Like the relief picture?
Go ahead,
yes.
Give it a
Do
sign.
it.
Okay.
Do it.
Hi, my name is Terrell Palmer, and I'm your financial advisor. And from time to time, we look at all of your outstanding bonds and look for an opportunity to refinance those bonds. A lot like refinancing your home mortgage, autos, whatever. Right now, you have bonds that are probably in the 5% range in interest rate, and the new bonds that we'll be issuing will have interest rates of approximately 3.5%. And so you can see we're saving 1.5% on that interest rate, which then translates into debt service savings. We're going to issue, the authorization allows us to issue up to $150 million in refunding bonds, and we're hoping to save $20 million in present value savings and about $30 million in gross savings kind of over time. So it's a wonderful transaction, and it's one that Jill and I and Dr. Randall have been looking at for probably 6 months or so, looking for the right opportunity to get closer to the call date on those bonds, as well as waiting for an opportunity for interest rates to remain low and stay and get a little bit lower. And we think it's going to come to us in January. We think it's a good opportunity.
Thank you.
So you said the interest rate would be at 3.1%?
3.5.
Oh, 3.5.
And the existing rate on the bonds that we're going to be replacing is 5%. So that's a 1.5% drop in that interest rate. All of the savings that I discussed, the $20 million in present value, all of that, all of the cost of issuance of the transaction have been embedded in that numbers, and so that is a net amount to the district and its taxpayers.
When was the last time that this was I don't want to call it refinanced, but.
In 2015.
2015, oh, so just
This
last
year,
year.
earlier this year, we
Oh,
had a
okay.
$8 million roughly refunding transaction.
So this happens often?
It's
Yes.
gonna happen.
Okay.
And most of the time, we're waiting for your new money issues, and so we can do kind of a combined transaction of new money and refunding. But the opportunity here of $20 million in savings was just too great to have to wait until your next new money sale, which might be later on in 16 or maybe early 17, just kind of depending on the construction. Okay?
Do that at home.
So, but the 3.5% interest that's not for certain though, right? Because in the verbiage that we have here on
Right.
page 36, it says that the sale of the bonds shall produce a true interest cost to the district of not more than 4.5%.
Right.
So is that the same?
That is.
So it could go up to 4.5%. So 3.5% is not for certain.
No, it's not for certain. We actually sold Spring ISD refunding bonds, very similar size today, and this rate of 3.5% is their rate. And so we will not be in the market until early January on this transaction, and so we are susceptible to interest rate increases until that date. If interest rates go up, it's going to hurt your savings, but if it moves dramatically from what we're talking about tonight, we will certainly come back to the board and say, hey, things just got away from us, interest rates shot up, and we're gonna continue to wait on this refunding for the right opportunity.
Is there a limit on how often you can do it? Do you have to wait a year?
There's a school district issuing tax-exempt bonds is really a privilege provided to it by the federal government, and the federal government puts a lot of restrictions on how many times a municipality can refinance its outstanding bonds. You can only do an advance refunding one time. You can only do a current refunding at the call date. There's a lot of restrictions. And that's a little bit why we delay the issuance of refunding bonds, waiting for that one, as they call it, one bite at the apple to get all the savings that we can out of that issue, because it's not something that you can, a year from now, come back and refinance the refunding. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
For your clear response to my dumb question.
No dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
I got lost in all the paperwork last night at midnight.
The next item on the agenda is consider approval of behavioral autism program software support. And we ask that the board approve Rethink Autism for behavior and autism program software support for the district at a cost of $52,500.
Are we changing our program? Are we adding? Is this an addition of the program, or?
Hi. This is a new program that we issued out an RFP for. It covers the behavior and autism, and the plan with this approach is to begin small and expand the program out. They want to kind of cycle through a system with it and then look at expanding the program out for the future. So this just kind of gets us a starting place to start from.
Can you give us an idea of what the software does?
That I cannot. I apologize. I'm not that familiar with the software. I just went through the procurement process with them. But I can have Ms. Mathis here Thursday to make sure that we can address some of those questions that you might have.
It'll basically be the special education educators using the software.
Yes.
Yes.
What's our funding source for this?
This is federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
That's not necessary. I can call her and ask her.
Okay.
I'm just curious.
Okay.
This-
I think they
what
actually have a
software.
demo that they might be able to share with you. I know the vendor can set you up with a demo and you can look at it online. He's
Think it'd
been
be
very
something that-
amenable to sharing everything.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of instructional materials, equipment, supplies, and related items. We're asking that the board approve all vendors who responded to the proposal for instructional materials, equipment, supplies, and related items for the district.
And this is just as needed, correct? Almost like our.
Yes,
food.
our existing instructional materials bid only consisted of about 40 vendors, and it was time to upgrade and look at some of those vendors that were there. Certainly with the growth that we're experiencing, 40 was not enough for a district this size. We polled all of the campuses and all the departments. They were very helpful with submitting names of companies that they'd like to use, companies that they've reached out to or seen programs from. So we were pleased to jump the list from the existing 40 to 410. It also allowed us to kind of zone in a little bit more on some of the vendors that we're currently using that we consider to be sole source. We're trying to pull away from sole source because it's difficult to prove on a procurement aspect. So we actually were able to remove 80 of our sole source vendors and move them into this RFP, which is a big win for us.
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of Digital Knowledge Central and Interlocal Agreement for Digital Resources. We ask that the Board of Trustees consider approval of a Region 20 interlocal agreement for 2015-16 digital resources through their Digital Knowledge Central program. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of renewal of charter bus services. We're asking that the board approve renewal of Sam's Limousine and Transportation, Sierra Stagecoach and Ambassador Limousine and Transportation, and AFC Transportation.
Quick question on the AFC. It seems to be so much higher than the rest of them. Do they offer something specific that we can't go to the other three?
No,
services?
really it's based on their availability and timing. AFC has a contract with the University of Houston. They also do a rodeo contract. Sometimes they're a little bit more difficult to get, but then there's other times that we actually need them. Times like this when everybody's heavy into district games and there's lots of charters being serviced throughout the Houston area. It becomes a struggle to lock some of these buses in. So we just wanted to have a nice variety. Realize there's fluctuations in the price. We're going to work on that. This is the third and final year of this RFP. So we're going to try to see if we can streamline it a little bit better, maybe have it a little bit more clearly organized so that it's easier for the teachers to lock in those buses when they need them.
Thank you.
Michelle, can
Yes.
you give me a couple of examples of when we use these?
When we would use the charter buses, actually, I think there's a mileage that we estimate whenever we're booking travel in. Am I correct on
Outside of
that?
100-mile radius, but typically we were fortunate that the playoff games for us mostly were at home. Anytime
Yes.
that we travel to San Antonio, Waco, outside the area, we typically try to use charter buses for that. And we typically try to bus all the kids, whether it's band, drill team folks, everyone.
Exactly. And we do have a variety of sizes of buses, so we're not always having to get the huge 54s. We can get smaller, like shuttle-type buses when we need them.
So the next time someone asks why we don't take those fancy buses where we're going, like, for example, George Ranch, we can say, well, we didn't go over 100 miles.
It's really based on the mileage,
Okay.
and that's simply just for student comfort.
And the coach probably doesn't want to change what he's been doing.
Kind of nice to have a movie on board.
That's the best reason to do it.
Do they request the same number on the bus?
Yeah, as long as it's an approved vendor, we're good.
Well, I've got my Friday night shirt to wear.
All right. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of donations to the district, and those donations are listed for the board. The next item is consider approval of architect rankings for three.
Dr. Randall, could I ask a
Oh,
quick question on that?
okay.
The very last one down there is a bench as a memorial to a deceased teacher. How do we regulate memorials? I mean, we could have a memorial to my cat, or, you know, how do we decide that? Is there some way that we control memorials?
We don't, the board doesn't have a policy or anything related to that. We typically have just been addressing them as they come up with a request.
Okay.
We haven't had any memorials to what you just mentioned, but we are getting more and more requests for benches and those types of things, to a point where we probably are going to come back to the board at some point with some type of guidance on that, because absent that, we're making a decision based on something that just...
The reason I ask that, from my neighborhood board experience, people want to put up memorials to all kinds of things. We sort of had to regulate that, so just saying.
We're just about there.
All right, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is consider approval of architect rankings for 3 high school practice pools. We're asking that the board approve the ranking of architects and authorize the superintendent to begin contract negotiations for architect services for the practice pool facilities at Fulshire, Foster, and George Ranch High School. And as you can see, the rankings is listed for you. We start with number 1, and then, of course, work through the rankings. That, yes, ma'am.
In approval of these rankings, it is also giving you a permission or the authority to start negotiations with the first ranked
That's
architect, correct?
Because by law, we can't have that conversation until after the board approves the rankings.
Okay. And then, is it the same for each of, also for the 3 high schools, the practice pools, is it the same architect?
Yes.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of architect rankings for the Terry High School baseball complex renovations. And we're asking the board to approve the architect rankings for that complex. The next item on the agenda is consider approval of architect rankings for satellite agricultural barn number 3.
And in this case, it changes, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of architect rankings for the Lamar Consolidated and Terry High School Band Hall expansion. And the rankings are the same as the previous one. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of new sidewalk project at Polly Ryan Middle School. We're asking that the Board of Trustees approve facility sources for the installation of a new sidewalk from Polly Ryan Middle School to Antoinette Redding Junior High School in the amount of $44,400. Next item on the agenda is consider approval of new bus purchase. We're asking that the Board of Trustees approve Thomas Bus Sales for the purchase of 42 new 77-passenger buses and 12 new 39-passenger lift buses in the amount of $4,954,070.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It states here that they will be air-conditioned.
That's correct.
Okay. What about the seat belts? Is there some law now that we have to make sure some of these buses have the seat belts?
There is no, go ahead, I'm sorry. I'm just jumping the gun.
The law that was passed several years ago, the state said you have to put seatbelts on there if we give you the money. And they never.
If the state gives you the money.
If the state provides the money for it. And they did not do that.
So the state's not giving the money for the safety of the children on the school buses? Thank you. I had to say that.
Now, the smaller buses that are equipped with the lifts, they have lap belts in them. That comes standard because a lot of times we have to put car seats in.
That's understandable. On the lift buses, it says they're air-conditioned, and it's a 39-passenger.
If you go to the mic so we can pick you up.
Trying to stay out of the camera.
You can
I know.
turn around and speak to Kim. Is there any given time, or what's the most that we ever have on one of those lift buses?
Well, I don't think it would really approach 39. It's kind of confusing in that that would normally be what we would call a 53-passenger bus because of the number of rows of seats. But it's rated based on the total number of seats that are in the bus plus the wheelchair locations. Those will come with probably the seating for 36 ambulatory kids in 3 wheelchair positions. Or it could be, I don't remember if it's 36 and 3 or 35 and 4. So that's where the 39 comes from.
Can you purchase smaller capacity buses?
You can. I mean, you can get them in any size from 14 passenger up to 96 passenger.
So why are we doing the 39 passenger if that's not we don't use it for that many students?
Well, it gives us the room. A lot of times it's, it's good when we do the seating arrangements for those buses. It gives us a lot of flexibility. And if we do have a trip that we have a lot of kids that may not need to sit together, or it gives us the ability to separate those kids and not put too close together. That bus it's a good size bus. It's large enough to do a lot of different things, but it's still small enough to be maneuverable to get into some of the cul-de-sacs and places that we need to go to get to the door for those kids. Is that?
Go ahead.
If you had to, you could use the bus for non-special ed children, right?
Yes, and it would be handy in a case where if we had a class that wanted to go on a field trip and one class was going and they had one student in a wheelchair, it's big enough to carry a class with one wheelchair student or up to 4.
I've just had questions, few approaching me when they see them and they only see 1 or 2 students as to why do we have such large buses for what appears to be a small number of students.
Well, and the other thing that goes along with that too, the bigger it is, the safer it is.
Okay.
And
You got it there.
I like the bigger the better theory. So.
You said the key word, safe. Okay. All right, thank you.
I guess I had a question. Are these buses being bought by the 2014 bond? Was that in the bond for these? Okay.
Yes.
And was it in the bond for air conditioned, or did we upgrade to that? Or
It wasn't.
it wasn't stated, so, because I know we had discussed.
Is that getting to be the modern trend in Texas now to go to air-conditioned buses?
It is. Talking to our suppliers, they said that they won't even stock a bus without AC if they're buying one that's not ordered. And most of the surrounding districts all have AC buses.
And this still fit the budget of the bond. Okay.
One more question then. These are not to replace buses as much as it's to accommodate the new schools?
There'll be some replacement going on. There's some buses that we will replace, but we'll probably keep some of the older fleet on to accommodate the growth as
Okay.
well.
All right, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is consider approval of purchase agreement with Nefco Incorporated for the baseball scoreboard at Foster High School. We're asking that the board approve Nefco Incorporated for the installation in the amount of $27,450.
I'm going to ask a silly question maybe, but something like this, is that something we just don't do when we're building the schools? The scoreboards?
We did. This is a replacement.
This is the replacement?
This is a replacement.
Okay. It fell apart?
Well, I don't know, but
Okay.
I got lots of calls.
We had so many home runs hit until.
All right.
Next item on the agenda, consider approval of Centerpoint blanket easements for the new elementary number 24. We're asking the board to approve that blanket easement. Next item on the agenda is discussion and action on the request for qualifications for future schools.
I don't know, I guess I didn't hear it right. I thought this was supposed to be, that we're going to gather information. I didn't realize this was going to be an action item. Is that what we had asked for? Just when we asked for
I
discussion? I didn't know what.
If it was the one that I asked to be on the agenda, I think that what I had asked was just a discussion on where we are on future schools, not necessarily an RFQ.
This probably came from something I asked about, because in one of the previous board meetings, the last time we RFQ'd our architects for the school complex was 2006. And just from a prudent business standpoint, I believed it was time to go back to the market to RFQ our architects again, to verify that we are where we need to be with our architects. So that's what it is. That was one of the things I was really trying to get to. It's time to RFQ for our architects again, our primary architect for the school. So it's okay.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, what would the action item be?
That's what I was questioning.
Well, there is no, that was the interpretation of what we thought that the board wanted, and so we typically, it doesn't mean you have to take any action. It's just, it has to be listed that way if you did.
Okay.
And
So
so
we,
that's why it was listed as discussion and action.
so we can discuss this on Thursday.
You can.
This is to see what are options to have another RFQ out for architects, basically, for future projects.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is consider approval of attendance boundary committee. And we're asking the Board of Trustees to approve the attendance boundary committee. And we have provided the proposed timeline for the rezoning of elementary number 24. And those are the action items, Madam President. And if you'd like, I continue with information.
Yes, let's go ahead.
The 2015 highly qualified teacher report has been provided for you. We'll answer any questions that you may have over the highly qualified teachers report. School Board Recognition Month is in January for the board, and this is just alerting you that the board will receive recognition in January. Report on board member training. This is when the board chairman will literally enter into the records each individual board member's trainings that they've accumulated this past year. Next item on the agenda is Lamar Education Awards Foundation let me back up. The stewardship report, and we will actually do a presentation to the board on Thursday night on the stewardship report. Next item on the agenda is Lamar Education Awards Foundation LEAF update. Again, a very, very successful year with our Education Awards Foundation. Next item on the agenda is Information Tax Collection Report. We'll answer any questions if you have any regarding the report. Next item is payment for construction projects. Each month we list all of the invoices that have been paid from on our construction projects. Next item is Region 4 Maintenance and Operation Update.
A quick question on those. The closed out 2011 bond closed projects, the uncommitted funds, total almost $6 million. Is that the money we will be able to apply to new projects approved by the board? Yes? Okay, thank you.
And we have the 2011 bond program report. At your table, you should have the 2014 bond program report. And we also provided for the board a transportation update. And hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, and we'll answer any questions that you may have regarding transportation and the update.
First of all, I appreciate the report because it gives us some things to work with. I want to put a little positive spin on it, which is one of the things I think we need to do to advertise for transportation. You look at that student discipline, it sounds like, oh my goodness, we had 312 discipline referrals in November. But if you start to calculate the number of student trips we have in a month, you've got roughly 15,000 in the morning, 15,000 in the afternoon. If you have 22 average working days in the month, you've got 660,000 student movements. And we had 312 issues out of 660,000. So percentage-wise, the number doesn't look too good. Gil, can I come sit with you?
No, I couldn't have said it better. Because and commend our staff. Sometimes we lose sight of
Exactly.
how much interaction you have with those kids on a day-to-day basis and the success that they have. Because our transportation department really works hard. They really, truly do. So.
Well, it struck me that way. Oh, that sounds bad, but you put it in perspective, that's pretty darn good.
It's a lot of movement.
A lot of movement.
Great job, guys. We appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? We have
No, go ahead.
the naming of schools.
I have a question on that. We don't know all the locations of these schools. Why do we do all of this right now? I mean, people in different communities in different areas may have a special reason for submitting a name. And we don't know where some of these schools are going to be located right now.
Correct. Historically, Lamar CISD, the board has looked at that as a district, not so much as a location. So it hasn't had a history of putting campuses and names together. And I reference again, Mr. Lehman is the junior high in the Fulshire area, and he was a well-represented member of Lamar CISD. The reason that the board has historically done all of the naming at one time is it's announced to the community at one time. You get everybody in the community the opportunity to bring forward their nominations, their supporting documentation. The board gets to look at that all at one time thoroughly, and everyone knows about it versus naming someone this month and then 2 months later you name someone else, but the community wasn't aware of that you were going to name that school and they want to tell someone. When you consolidate the process and let everyone know, you get all of the good information at one time and slate those names. That's typically how the board has done it in the past.
And when the nominations come in, are they designated for a certain number school, or are they just all put together?
They're designated for a preference, either elementary school, middle school, junior high, or high, if it was on the bond, a high school, both. So the nominator would put down, anything, or specifically an elementary school, or the high school, or the junior high, or the middle school. So they have options in terms of where they want the board to look at placing those nominations.
Okay, so like now, the elementary schools, we will have, what, 4, 5?
5.
5.
One middle school.
And the middle schools, so they'll just pick a number as far as
They
the
would designate it
preference?
either elementary school, middle school, or
They
either.
wouldn't pick a number, we'd pick
The board,
We
the
would
board
pick- we
actually
would
would
pick-
determine the area or which school
Which
it
number
is. That's
school it
correct.
would go
They're
to?
just saying
Okay,
elementary.
okay.
And during the public hearing, if you've not been through this before, you will have a number of people that will come and stand right there and share with you why they feel like a school should be named after the individual that they are. So the board sits and listens to every one of the individuals that actually come
See
up.
why we
and-
do it all at once.
That's right.
We wouldn't want to do that all.
But ultimately, then we pick the school.
You all pick the school, and once it's done, then we're not, the other thing is that when you name all, it's just like right now, we're not having any discussions about Fulshire High School. That all of that has already been done, and we can move on down the road.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The next item on the in information was the was the demographic report review. And that was a requested item.
Questions?
Okay. And that's it? That's it?
Well, I guess I took me a little while. I do have a question. I just, I don't know if I requested this or not, but will we have a demographer in the near future to
in February.
And we won't have one prior to that?
No, no, ma'am. We typically bring them in February, and they give us the overall update that we operate on for the next year. We bring them in every year because we're such a moving target.
Will it be then in February when we get the recommendation on where number 25 will be?
The location,
The location for school number 25?
we may answer that in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I would point out, too, that this is essentially the demographic reporting season for PASA and other demographers in the state. Right now, they're going to get our data from technology, and they're going to plan essentially from January through mid-February the most up-to-date information about Lamar CISD, what's happening, the growth and projections. And they're doing that right now with the Katies and the Sci-Fairs and the spring branches. So really and truly, kind of between November and February, they're essentially booked to run through all those reports for all of the school districts in Texas. But they're going to get our full attention essentially from January into February and be back here for the February board meeting for the annual report.
Thank you.
That's it, Madam Secretary.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we will adjourn to a closed session pursuant to the Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, 551.082, the Open Meetings Act. The time now is 7:11. Board will reconvene at 7:45. Are there any discussions? If not, meeting is adjourned.
At 7:45.